what is the Navy SEAL standard, right? Like that's a big question. This comes from a lot of emails, believe it or not, that are, hey Jeff and Catherine, what's the minimum standard? The minute, like that's where this comes from, and the reason why I think people talk that there's a minimum standard is because I think a lot of the people that are talking about becoming a Navy SEAL, they're operating at a much lower standard than the actual community. And so there's this idea that, oh, I can go do this thing and I can get in on basically the minimum standard and still go do the thing. And that's where we see a lot of frustration and people coming through thinking that, oh wow, like I didn't realize how difficult it is to work your way into a position that's like, oh, I thought all Navy SEALs were no, they're not. They're not all the same, okay? And so we see, let's use again the first stages of this, like the standard that we're being held to is like when you go into boot camp, right? These guys have all gotten a contract. That contract that they've gotten is based on numerical, right? Basically standards. Where they're being compared against the population of their peers, officer enlisted. Officer side tend to have a little bit more higher standard numerically, but later on it's just never, there's no value to that. And you'll see even like the lowest standard people that get through BUD/S still become a Navy SEAL, right? And that's, to me, that's odd, but it's still a thing, right? So you go to boot camp, right, or OCS, whatever it might be, there's a numerical standard that you're gonna be compared against your, like I said, your peers, and those decisions are going to be made by detailers, right? The people that are saying, hey, we have this many spots, we have this many enlisted, we have this many officer. We're going to look at basically like a lottery. They're going to look at everyone's scores and things like that and compare, and they're going to fill those positions based on those numerical scores, right? And so that's your first standard is what is the PST, the physical screening test, and that's their standard is based on that history of numbers, okay? So let's say that these people get their contract and they've met that standard, right? Now we go into the BUD/S, right? What I'm going to tell you is yes, you have to pass the PST at a certain standard just to keep doing it, right? But those standards still are a comparative standard. They don't take just the highest scores. I mean, they do, but the idea, like, you want to think about it like this. You know, even the running test, the standard like you have in BUD/S, the standard is a time, not a placement, right? The running at BUD/S would be very, very different if they said, hey, don't worry about time, but if you don't finish in the top 40, you're gonna get dropped. That standard really then changes, but the standard is a numerical, when a number, 28 minutes, whatever it may be, here's your standard, right? So that's what everyone's compared against, those metrics and numbers based on a standard within those selection or deselection. And then it goes we're in BUD/S, we're in SQT, but that's where you start seeing a really divergence of these standards. Because now you're in SQT, right? You're gonna be asked to, again, shoot your pistol or rifle at a higher standard than you achieved at BUD/S, right? To get graduation in BUD/S, you just have to shoot a standard with your pistol and a rifle to the level of marksman. And then it goes to sharpshooter and then expert, right? Not everyone gets the standard of expert, right? Me included. When I graduated BUD/S, I only shot marksman. So I shot really poorly. I did not meet the standard, in my opinion. I barely met the standard as a shooter getting out of BUD/S. When I graduated boot camp, I did not have the expert E's on my ribbons. A little bit embarrassing for sure. Like I did not meet a standard and I was really quite embarrassed of it, truthfully, right? So again, goes into that standard, right? And now I got to the team. Now I'm through BUD/S, I'm in SQT. The standard doesn't get lesser, and where does that standard come from? The standard comes with an internal community. The community says, you need to be able to accomplish these things at this rate. You need to be able to shoot at this level. You need to be able to move at this level. You need to be able to communicate to your peers at this level, right? It's fairly objective, a little bit of subjectivity to it, right? Of like what's being measured, but there's always peer evals. There's peer reviews all to this point. And so you're being compared internally to your peers, right? And there's a standard set there. But again, where does that standard lie? to the whole community, you're going to see that that standard is extremely low still, right? You get to SQT, yes, you get your trident at the end of it because you've met a standard, a very basic standard. That's how we got through basic underwater demolition SEAL training, basic. We went to SQT, SEAL qualification training. It's a little bit more advanced, but it's certainly not advanced, right? And so now there's a new standard. So you check into the team and you're like, nobody cares what you got on your PST score. We see the standard's like, well, yeah, but I did 100 push-ups. You know what? Nobody cares. Like, to the point where it's insulting. You spent all this time chasing these numbers. You get to SQT and be like, holy shit, really nobody cares about the standard. That because it's not that the PST isn't a standard in which SEALs compare themselves against. They don't. We internally compared ourselves against how many deployments did I do? What is my shooting quality? Like, am I a sniper, am I a breacher? What's my skill level? What am I offering the community? Because we're not offering PST scores at that point. You're offering skill, right? Do you have skill that you can teach back, right? Do you have the coursework? Were you a good enough SEAL and dependable enough person that your leadership sent you to these schools, sent you to breacher, sniper, all these schools? If they didn't send you to primary schools, then you probably weren't meeting the standard and you got passed by your peers. And that's really what we're seeing, you see internally, is how do we differentiate on the inside? By our qualifications, our quals, right? What quals did you have? Did you have, like I said, the primary calls? Okay, and now that's the white side team. So here's the crazy part, which I didn't understand, I'm sorry, and I found out firsthand. It was quite shocking. I would consider myself a pretty high, like eventually I got expert on my stuff, right? I didn't persist, I reshot, because to get into sniper school, you had to really shoot, right? I think you had to shoot over a 180 on a scale of 200, maybe it was a 190, right? So we had to shoot at a better skill, you had to learn. So we did, I learned over the year, I shot better, and now I have these new skills, right? But now I gotta give them back, or like, where am I at? Like, I didn't have any skills after my first deployment, or I'm sorry, before my first deployment, I got a SQT, I have no skills. Oh shit, I didn't have a standard, okay? And so the white side teams, where I realized, which is shocking, like I said, was the highest performers on the white side teams don't even meet the minimum standard of tier 1. And it was shocking. I didn't realize how little I knew. And like I said in the previous video, I augmented a work trip with Blue Squadron after my first deployment. I went to Nashville, linked up with those guys, and I was like, oh, I'd never seen Navy SEALs move like that, shoot like that, communicate like that, with gear like that. And I was like, I immediately felt, I was a little bit angry, a little upset. I was like, whoa, like, what have I been learning? Because I have not been learning that. And then I realized how different the standard really is, and the inside is like way different. The tactical, the tactical standard it's like an entirely different branch of service, honestly. The physical standard, way more difficult, way more demanding, right? The kind of the knowledge standard, the stuff that you're expected to know, understand, and teach back was robust compared to what I had at SEAL Team 5. It was very weird to me. Like, I was like, how are we? I didn't, truth be told, my second deployment to Ramadi, I felt very under-taught. Like, I was like afraid. I was straight to you, I was afraid. I was going to one of the most dangerous cities in the world at the time, and I was like, holy shit, after what I saw, Blue Squadron, and my skill, like, I was fucking afraid. And so that's why I was so persistent about getting out of there and getting to the next level, because I realized the best operators that I saw at SEAL Team 5 or 2 or whatever it was, they had nothing on the guys at the command. And so I was like, holy shit, there's a whole nother standard. And I was like, I gotta be part of that standard, okay? So green team. And then here's the crazy thing is people say, what's the best thing about your time in the Navy? Like, I learned more in green team than I ever did really at any point in my SEAL career. Like, it was awesome. It was awesome. So much learning, so much knowledge, so much wisdom being passed down by world-class, like, giants and operators, just amazing men, right? Just teaching us everything we could. I would say after a week in green team, I had learned and acquired more skill in that 1 week than I did in 4 years at SEAL Team 5, and especially with the gun and shooting and moving. It was like, oh my God, this is what I signed up for, right? And again, there's a really big standard there, right? And to get through that. And so then the next piece of standard is like, okay, there's more. Yep. So then I got to the squadron and it's like, hey man, cool, congrats, but you have a year before we're even gonna consider you, this is where your home's at. Like, we gotta make sure that you've picked up the standard, you're sticking with the standard, you're able to move and shoot with our squadron guys. And like, this again, like that was like, okay, well, I gotta keep up to standard. And who was I keeping the standard? Like my senior enlisted dudes, my troop chiefs, my team leaders, that's who taught us everything. And that's who I look up to. And that's who was like, oh, those dudes are the standard. Yep, that's how they shoot, that's how they move. And they were all of them are enlisted, every single one of them. Right? So okay, I'm like, okay, that's the standard, a green team. That's the standard when I get into the squadron. And it's like, oh, okay. A year later, like, congratulations, man, you've made it, kind of. Now let's see if your peer group, if you're good enough over the next couple of years to develop yourself into a team leader. Oh my God. Then it's like you really get these very serious courses placed upon you. You have to get through all the RSO stuff. You have to get the jump masters. You have to do for free fall and static line. You have to start going through all these professional development courses so you can become the standard or get damn close to it. Because I left the standard way behind me at the SEAL Team 5, man. At that point in the game, it's like, well, that's basically basic infantry compared to what I know now. And it was amazing. It was so awesome to get that opportunity to learn at that level and to see what the real standard was within the SEAL teams, right? And that's where I realized, like, when we would forward deploy, everyone supports us, not the other way around, right? Guys supported us that I went through buds with, and guys that supported us that were years ahead of me in the teams. But when they showed up at Dev Group to support us, my knowledge base was so much higher than these guys that have been in the Navy years longer than me. I didn't listen to them. They listened to me. I was in charge if we were in a tactical space. I could have had a senior chief or a master chief from any of the teams, which wasn't uncommon, and I'm an E5 or E6 in the train. They're behind me, right? They don't have the knowledge base that I acquired. Right? And I was like, that's why I left. That's why I so wanted to get out of SEAL Team 5 and get to there, because I knew there was a higher standard. And it was very evident, okay? So again, after, then you're grooming for a team leader, that might take years, but because you have to acquire all these standards and skills. And then what? Oh my God, I'm not even the top yet. Now I'm at troop chief, right? And I go, okay, and there's an entirely new standard there that they have to achieve. And it's not admin. Right? And then these guys at a senior chief level or the troop chief, then they're going, there's next levels for those guys. And so where does the standard really lie? The standard lies kind of very much internal. On the inside, it's very, very evident internally who's in charge, right? And there's a very, very clear finite pecking order, if you will, when you get to that level. And that for me is the standard, because I got to see it all. I got to participate in it all. I received the benefit of being told by the highest standard Navy SEALs that we've got, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, don't screw this, all this stuff, that feedback. And that was the shortcomings for a lot of guys. I did not, when I got towards that working up through my team leader position, my immaturity, it didn't do well for me there. Like, I just wasn't mature enough to keep persisting into that team leader position and go on. So I saw, like, what did I do? I didn't meet the standard. So how do I know that there's a standard inside and it keeps going? Because I failed at that standard, right? I succeeded at all these different standards below it. I separated myself from the young Navy SEAL Jeff that I thought I was on top of the world, right? And then I realized real quickly, like, holy crap, there's a pecking order to this, and I'm not meeting the standard. So nobody is comparing, right, necessarily. They're not on the outside really making that comparison, because society doesn't differentiate between them. But on the inside, there's a massive differentiation, and it's worthy of your time to pursue that. And so I just want everyone to know, like, that's why we coach up, because we know, we've experienced that the standard is extremely high. And there's no sense in me as saying, hey, the standard is down here for some enlisted guy or some officer at the Whiteside teams. That is so far beyond the standard that we are doing a real disservice to society saying that those folks are the standard, because it's not. And I think that that's what we get. We get a lot of people that don't realize the commitment it takes to meet and exceed the standard. And so when people email us and say, hey, Jeff and Catherine, what's the minimum standard? I'm like, whoa. It's lost upon me that someone would think that meeting a minimum standard is okay. But I guess I see why people say that it's okay, because a lot of people that met the minimum standard are talking about mental toughness and resiliency and all these sort of things. And it's actually pretty laughable, actually. But that's why we do what we do. Let's demonstrate the example. Let's be the example. Let's share the example, and let's not pretend that just by wearing this trident that you have met the SEAL standard, because that is so far from the truth.